ahead.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Can you guys hear me? Is this on? So we're going to get started. This is a two-part presentation with 4 presenters, so I'm just here to introduce them. First, we're going to have Kris Long. He's a professor of philosophy and classics and the associate dean of undergraduate and graduate education in the College of the Liberal Arts. And he'll be talking about his enhanced digital book, Socratic and Platonic Political Philosophy, Practicing a Politics of Reading. He'll also be talking about the Public Philosophy Journal, and in that he'll be joined by Mark Fisher, who is a lecturer and TLT director in philosophy, Chris Klotz, who's a grad student in philosophy, and Andre de Avillez, who is a PhD candidate in philosophy. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kris.
Thanks, Casey. It's great to be here today. So what we're going to try and do is about 20 minutes total of presentation, maybe 22 minutes if we ramble on a little bit, and then conversation. So we really want to have a larger conversation about the situation that we face in digital publishing in a digital age. I'm a philosophy faculty member, and so the first couple of slides here is to give you a little sense of the context in which both of these digital projects are situated in. So the first quotation here is from, well, all 3 of these quotations are from Jerome McGann from this article, The Future is Digital, written in 2008, but I think it's still largely true what he says here, but there are some shifts that are happening that we're seeing. First is the greater an institution's primary mission is conceived in research terms, the less will the faculty be involved with digital technology. Okay? Very important point that I think it was particularly true in 2008, decreasingly true now as universities like ours get much more and more into digital technology. Obviously, with 500 people here at a conference like this, there's a huge cohort of people who are interested in this, but it does speak to this point about how is research and the research endeavor integrated into the digital modes of communication, and that's what both these projects really talk about. The second quote is, no one today can doubt that scholarly research exchanges, communication, and authorized publication will have to be digitally organized and executed in a regular way. Obviously, a lot of our librarians in here know this is already largely happening, but it is critical that this is what's going on, and it's something that we as humanists in particular need to think about how it's impacting our lives. And the third one is particularly scathing of us humanists. He says, yet digital illiteracy puts most humanists on the margin of conversations and actions that affect the center of our cultural interests as citizens and our professional interests as scholars and educators. So with that as the context, what I thought I would do and what we thought we would do was create a couple of projects that went right at the heart of this. Obviously, we didn't know that we were masochists going right into this world of humanities research. But the 2 projects we're going to talk about today are this book, Socratic and Platonic Political Philosophy, which is an enhanced digital book, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And the second project is the Public Philosophy Journal, recognizing both that philosophers are not necessarily known for being digital, and second of all, philosophers are not known for loving the public. So we really are kind of masochistic. So let me talk a little bit first about the book project, and then I'll bring Mark and Kris and Andre up to talk more specifically about the Public Philosophy Journal. And for that one, just a little heads up, we do have swag, so people can take their stickers, and then I'm hoping to see those on some computers. As you can see, if I don't check, you can see it's on my computer. Okay, that's what you can look like. Yours can look like that too. Okay, so the argument of this book is that Socrates, in the dialogues, engages those people he encounters by turning their attention to what's good and just and beautiful. That's what he does. And he calls that, he says, I'm the only one who practices the true art of politics. And by that he means I get people to turn outside of their day-to-day normal lives and to look at what's possible, what might be good or better or just or beautiful about the world in which we live. And so I argue in the book that that's the nature of Socratic politics. It is designed to turn our attention from what is mundane to what is possible, and to orient our communications with one another to those ideals. Now, in arguing for this book, I came to realize that, well, you know what? Plato is doing something kind of similar with us readers. He did this really weird thing. He wrote dialogues, and nobody writes dialogue. I mean, back then, okay, Plato's Plato, but it didn't take in philosophy. There's not a whole lot of dialogues in the history of philosophy afterwards. But he wrote dialogues, I think, for philosophically very important reason. And that is because he recognizes that philosophy as an endeavor is always situated and contextual. And it's always, and we can't forget that. And part of what is frustrating for me as a scholar of ancient Greek philosophy is that the beauty of Plato's Socrates and the nuances and context of the dialogues got distilled into something called Platonism, which then you probably got fed in your intro to philosophy classes as, well, Plato thinks this and Plato thinks that. Well, Plato never wrote in his own voice. Plato only wrote what he said, the things that are called my writings are only the sayings of a Socrates made beautiful and new. And that is and he did that for a reason. So part of my interest here is in what are his writing strategies to get us to think about what's beautiful and good and just. He uses certain kinds of strategies. He has his dialogue situated as the memories of certain kinds of characters to remind us that, wait, this is not what you're getting is the absolute truth. Remember that, readers. And he has those characters come back in at specific points in the dialogue, their conversation come back in and break up that dialogue to remind us again that this is a story told. You can't ever forget you're reading this. But this was the new technology for Plato, right? Socrates didn't write. Plato did. Writing was the new technology as they moved from an oral tradition to a written one. And it's a good thing Plato wrote because otherwise, well, I wouldn't be able to write a book about it and we wouldn't have all these intro to philosophy classes with this figure of Socrates who's pretty amazing. So as I was writing this book, I thought, how can I perform kind of the argument that I'm making in the book? Well, one way I did this was I had digital dialogue podcasts. I invited colleagues of mine onto the digital dialogue, a podcast that I set up, and we talked about their work. And I usually I read an article of theirs and I invited them onto the podcast. Very simple thing, just set it up. We post the podcast up there. And so the very writing of this book was informed by these podcasts, over 60 of them now. And we posted them, and some of the best conversations I've had in my career are those podcasts. And then I thought, okay, well, once the book's published, I don't want to just publish it and go walk away and it be some dead piece of paper on the ground. I want it to be a living dialogue. So can I convince somebody to allow me to publish it in such a way that if you make annotations on it, if you write comments in the margins digitally, I'll see them as the author. They'll feed to me in my blog, and I'll be able to respond. Can we create a community of collaborative readers with the reading of this book? So Cambridge said they were totally into this. This was going to be great. You know, I had the book vetted, normal process, in case anybody's wondering. The whole digital thing wasn't really part of it was part of my proposal, but it wasn't part of the peer reviewing of the book. Then it was accepted as a book. One of the reviewers said, yeah, that digital stuff you don't really need to do. The other reviewer was really fired up about the digital. And I was arguing to Cambridge, no, the book is the digital. This is a digital book. If you take that away from me, I don't want to publish it. They said, okay, we can do this. I said, okay. So meanwhile, now they bring the book up as a physical book. They're good at that. That started happening fast, copy editing, all this stuff. Well, what's the cover going to look like? Okay. Yeah, but what about the digital? Well, it's coming out in the next month or two. And they are hard at work on this digital component. We have it built in now to the blog, my blog here, which if everything goes right with my tweets, which I scheduled at 11:10, so it should be very soon, you'll be getting a tweet to the blog. And the blog will be kind of this part of it, this digital dialogue section will become the place where comments of people reading the book and commenting on the book will be coming into there. And we're using this product called Livefire, and I'll be moderating that. Cambridge wanted to be sure that you'll be moderating these things, right? Yes, I promise I'll moderate. But it brings up a lot of questions which maybe we can talk about in the discussion about authorial authority and what happens when you turn your book into a community and you try to turn it into a community. So that's the real challenge. Now the next issue, so come on up, Mark and Kris and Andre. The next project that we want to talk about is the Public Philosophy Journal. So we're kind of taking this, taking the same idea of can you use the digital medium to create a community of scholars around an issue. So this is the Public Philosophy Journal, at least a screenshot of the journal. And I'm going to say a few things about it, and then I'm going to pass it off to Mark and Andre and Kris to talk about specific examples. What is the Public Philosophy Journal? It is an open access, open peer review online journal. Okay? That's a very simple way of putting it. And there's a lot of those out there. But the difference between the Public Philosophy Journal and other online journals is that we're going to be reading the web every day for conversations at the intersection of philosophy and issues of public concern. And then we're going to be curating those into a place on the web, reviewing those and publishing those. So the process that we're going to talk about will be explained now. Mark, I think you need a mic. You're doing this one, right?
So this is a quote that tells you a little bit about the sort of general idea behind what led us to think of this particular ecosystem of publishing. Clay Shirky, in his book, Here Comes Everybody, filter then publish whatever its advantages rested on a scarcity of media that is a thing of the past. The expansion of social media means that the only working system is publish then filter. Right? So the idea is that people are, this is not just a claim about what people ought to do, this is a claim about what people are already doing. Everyone in here, I'm sure, has the capacity to go home and publish something this afternoon. And our idea is that what we want to do is not make this journal the place where you have to send your stuff to us and then we sit up there and we decide whether it's good enough for us to publish. The idea is you're already publishing, people are publishing. We're going to go out and find the most interesting content that's out there, and we're going to invite those people first by calling the community's attention to this work being a sort of a place where people can go to find links to interesting discussions, and then invite those authors to join into dialogue with us and our community. So this is the original whiteboard version that Kris and I came up with one afternoon as we were kicking around these ideas from Clay Shirky and some others that we were reading and talking about some projects that we were working on. And then eventually we worked enough to refine a workflow into something that looks like this. The idea being that the primary way into the journal was going to be that we are going to be crawling the web, reading the web, trying to find out what conversations are going on out there. And then whether taking a piece directly that somebody has written and bringing it in for this peer review, or we're also going to have more traditional modes of submission as well, but we want to be sort of pluralistic about the sources that these pieces are coming from. And then the community will play a role in this open peer review system. So a target for review will be accessible on the site, and people can be discussing it and like they would on a blog post, while some specific reviewers are providing a more traditional review, which will then be published as an annotated version of the original object. And I say object because we're not presuming that everything is going to be textual. We're open to multimedia presentations as well. And then the result of the open peer review may be, yeah, this is great. We want to just put it into the journal. Another result could be revise and resubmit, but not necessarily, hey, good luck. Hope your next effort is better. But rather, let's bring to bear some of the resources that the community has onto the particular aspects of the work that we find promising, and the particular parts that we find challenging, and potentially develop a kind of collaborative writing in this public space, where if individuals are willing, they can submit their work as the first stage in what will become a co-authored work, or something that at least has more than just the obligatory footnote, thanks to so-and-so for their meaningful conversation, right? And so tracking that and also providing a kind of a venue where people who have great ideas but could use some help and could use some collaboration, polishing them in certain ways, can find that. And then the idea is that that process itself will feed back into sort of ongoing dialogue about these pieces, so they don't just end up as dead pieces in the paper, but they also are productive of things that sort of feed back into the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So now I guess we'll have Kris talk a little bit about the curation process.
Yeah, so the big picture here is that we're just curating content from the web that's related to the project of the Public Philosophy Journal. And so one example of that would be some of the work being done by folks at the Public Philosophy Network. Prominent examples of people there, one would be Kris Long, but also Noel McAfee, doing a lot of work online. And one of the ways we're doing this curation process is to use this plugin for WordPress called Press Forward, developed by folks at George Mason. And it's used both at Digital Humanities Now, as well as the Journal of Digital Humanities. And Press Forward is in part a RSS feeder, and so we use it within WordPress to both preview and nominate content that we will then push onto a curated content site, part of our site. And from within that curated content, we also will be more selective, have a sort of second stage selection process where we have sort of an editor's choice type of content that we'll put on our blog for further discussion and try to sort of generate this community that we're hoping to engage, that Mark was discussing a little bit. And so along with this plugin, we have right now a source list of around 150 blogs that we're continually building, and we really need help to continue to build that. So we have our Twitter handle here, PubPhilJ. You can submit any URLs to us that you think might be useful for this process, or you can also submit URLs on our website, Public Philosophy Journal.
So that really will help the web crawling process. So if you see some websites and blog posts and other things that are related to the intersection of philosophy and the public sphere, send them to us, and those will be some of the first sites we crawl when we do our thing. Okay, so now let's look at, and we got the curation process. Now we're going to talk a little bit with Andre about the open peer review process, beginning with this Kathleen Fitzpatrick quote.
Right, so I'm not sure if I need to read the quote for you, but I think it encapsulates a bit of what's driving the open review process that we're envisioning. We're envisioning something a bit different than what you typically see in open peer review journals. Typically what you see is something like, well, here's one nominated reviewer who is an expert in this field. He or she will review this. After the review is done, it will either be shared only with the editor and the author, or maybe it'll be posted in the journal's website or something after the article is accepted. If the article is rejected, you never see it. We're envisioning something that's really open and really public. So not only will we invite experts in the field to review the work, we'll also open the review process to the public at large. Whoever goes on, signs out to our website, will have commenter access, will have contributor access. Not exactly the same kind of privileges that a reviewer will have, but you'll be able to read anything, make marginal notes, comment on this paragraph, say this doesn't seem good. The main reason for that is that there were very good reasons at first why blind review was implemented, right? You wanted to avoid biases. You wanted to have a fair system. It's pretty obvious to anyone in academia that doesn't work, right? You can go to workshops on how to work the system and how to manipulate blind review. So we're trying to go open in order to avoid that. But there are problems with open review as well. I mean, you can exacerbate prestige bias, public, what's it called? Affiliation bias, confirmation bias, things like that. So if we have every process of peer review out in the open, if you have the reviewer posting the review for anyone to see whether or not the article will be accepted, then that review is itself open to review. The community can go and see, well, I can see the points the reviewer is making here, but he missed something big. There is something of value. We can push further. And if you're reviewing the reviewers themselves, then you can start to control affiliation bias and prestige bias and things like that. And this is what we think, I mean, we're not naive enough to think it's a silver bullet, but we think it's the best chance we have to address the concerns both about blind review and open review.
Great. All right. So that's open peer review. And now Mark's going to talk a little bit about collaborative writing.
Right. So as I mentioned earlier, the results of what you get back from the reviewers isn't necessarily going to be publish, revise, and resubmit, or no thanks. It could be in certain circumstances that we locate somebody within the network who has some particular interests or some particular expertise that would help to supplement what it is that's already there in the article, and we'll invite people into a developmental review process where we can partner them with experts. Our idea is also that a lot of this stuff can be further enhanced by occasional face-to-face meeting and establishing contacts face-to-face that are then sort of kept up through digital means. And so our idea is that one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to seed some ideas through workshops that we then envision will be productive of some content that will eventually be published in the journal. And then I think the next point is that one of the more ambitious things that we want to do is that I at least grew up with this idea that if you're going to review a work, you ought to have A, read it, and B, tried to read it as the author intended it to be read, or some vague hermeneutical notions there. What we see in a lot of cases, and we can understand because of the way journals are set up and because of institutional pressures, and sometimes the game seems to be, right, we give this to you so you can give us a reason not to publish it, right? And hey, I don't need to have read it to tell you not to publish it, but I do need to have read it to engage your argument. I do need to have read it to provide you, that is if I think that I'm providing you, the author, with some feedback rather than just providing the editor some feedback about whether or not this is the kind of thing that is worthy of their journal, right? Then I'm going to enter into a more collegial relationship with you, and that we are interested in sort of the design, in having the design of the journal itself informed by a substantive commitment to collegiality, right? And that we're going to make sure that, or we're going to do what we can to make sure that people are reading things carefully, are reading them in the spirit of collegiality, are addressing, are able to rehearse your view, at least in a cursory fashion, before they begin to tear it apart. And that's not something that a lot of us, right? We may have started with the idea that that's what we're supposed to do, but get sort of contextual clues along the way that that's not really what gets done, so that we're very surprised when we get a review back that is actually helpful. But if we want to produce or develop a community where people are working together on these topics and they're working on them in an open way, and in a way that puts the problem or the issue or the challenge, right, ahead of the author or the line on the vita or all these other things, then these are the kinds of things that we think are going to be most productive of those kinds of relationships.
So one thing I would add to that is, so what we're envisioning here is when you join the journal, ultimately when it's built, you'll have a profile, and you'll be able to earn points for doing certain things. The comments that you write, the quality, the way people have assessed your comments in terms of level of collegiality. If you publish an article with the journal, you're going to get some points. You'll get points probably for being a professor or for being an activist in a certain kind of context, which having experience in this, if you've published articles in other ways. So this profile is actually going to be a way for people to document. Actually, we're going to try and put how long you spend on the website actually reading articles, because we're going to be able to track that as part of your score. So the longer you spend on an article, the more you actually engage with this, the better it is. So and then that's going to hopefully turn into a situation where, with regard to tenure and promotion, we'll be able to actually give people not only, well, yeah, they reviewed this many articles in our site, but this is their score, this is their index score for their profile. And that means they've done these things. If they've had an article published, that article is going to come not only with the article itself, but with analytics about it, how many places it's been linked to, how many times it's been viewed, where it's been cited, those sorts of things. So hopefully filtering into the tenure and promotion process.
And one of the things that's kind of emerged as we've worked out these ideas is that what we're aiming for is a kind of social network where you're not connected to other people because you say like, right? You're connected to other people because you've read their work, because you've commented on their work, because they've referred to you, so that we can, through your activity on the site, generate a record of that activity that gives a much more nuanced and a much more interesting picture of the relationships that we all exist within when we're working with others in this kind of way. And so again, not just the thanks to so-and-so for their insightful comments, right? But look, yeah, I only have this article and this article, but see who has benefited from the comments that I've given, see what kind of stature I have within this community, and eventually, again, sort of working on norms in terms of collegiality and working together to recognize and to understand parts of the publication process that are often relegated to footnotes or worse.
So that little whiteboard turned into a $236,000 Mellon grant, so there is hope for those of you doing your whiteboarding out there. That grant is, we're in the first year of doing that. This is a collaborative process with Matrix, which is the Digital Humanities Lab at Michigan State. We're going out there next week. Watch our tweets there. We'll be tweeting a lot about the process. So right now what we have, what Kris was talking about with regard to the Press Forward and the WordPress site, that's just the first iteration of this. It's a very low level. We're just trying to sort of figure out the editorial process and get people to coming to the site for interesting comments. But this is going to really morph into its own platform, a whole new platform that's going to be designed to cultivate this community and publish this journal. So I think with that, we have plenty of time now for questions and comments on both of these issues. So thank you. Okay, yeah, you could clap. That's good. Thank you. And I'll take, and actually, not that prompting. Clapping gives out swag. So if anybody wants to take...
This is not if-then motivation.
Yeah, right,
This
exactly.
is just,
Here are some stickers if people want them. So we'll take questions. Yeah, you have a question. Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you guys are doing. This is fascinating. My first question kind of has to do with, so let me get this right, you're suggesting that you would sit in a place, you're opening up suggestions to people to what should go into this space or to enter into that cycle that you're looking at. Did you consider the idea of letting those suggestions come from anywhere rather than just, or eliminating the vetting process from it, just throw it up there and see what seems to generate interest rather than have the selection approach, let the crowd select, for example?
I think my first response there would be to say that that selective approach is part of the value that the journal is going to have for the imagined community. That is that, we talk about the fire hose, right? That everybody's out there, being bombarded with all kinds of things all the time. And one of the things that we could do to provide a service for the community is to filter some of that and to say, okay, we're not saying don't look at those other things, right? But we're saying that if your interests happen to overlap with ours to this degree, to a certain extent, then you might find this a helpful resource. We're out there. As Kris was saying, right now we're depending on people sort of suggesting links to us or suggesting articles to us, and anybody can do that. Anybody can come to the page and say,
You could reserve the right to say no.
and we could, yeah, exactly, yeah. But then also the next step is going to involve letting computers do what computers do best, and having the computers themselves read the web for content that's related instead of having to be listening to particular feeds.
At some point, it could still be kind of values-driven or agenda. Like there could be some agenda to filter out certain kinds of views or observations or biases. If you're saying this is kind of where we're going with this journal.
Right. And that's sort of the tricky line that we're saying up front that this is not supposed to be a value-neutral platform where anything can be up there and then a bunch of people will come along. But there are some general goals that guide what it is that we're doing.
And I would say, I was trying to pull the website up there, but of course, when you're in front of people, you can get Wi-Fi. So it's just technology. That's how it works. One of the ways we are doing a little bit of what you're saying is we're inviting people to send us URLs. So we're asking people not necessarily to submit specific articles, but give us a URL. It can be a one link to a specific article, but better for us will be one that's a blog or something that's producing interesting work in that area. So you can do that, and what we want to do is open it up to we want to see what the community gives us.
What would be interesting is to see, for all those that were declined for whatever reason, here's what we did not adopt, and here's why.
Yeah, that's what we're having that conversation.
And
You want to give him the...
We're doing that.
You can
There's
use
this
that,
one
yeah.
too. Yeah, we're doing that to some extent now in our trial stages of this. This is the first week that we've had the Pressware platform fully working. We've used another system before that, but now we're doing this, and we're compiling a list of criteria that what are the ideal pieces going to look like? What is it that we're looking for? We're not necessarily looking. This is actually a conversation we had. We're not looking for Noam Chomsky going in front of a public and talking as much as he has really great things to say, right? But that's the old style public philosophy, right? It's the intellectual, being in public intellectual by imparting his knowledge onto the otherwise ignorant folk, right? What we want is publicly engaged philosophy. So there's some criteria, and I think Mark could say a bit more about that, right? But we are doing, we're doing a bit of what, when he said, well, you could also let the crowdsource. There is a way in which we're also doing that, right? But we want to be sure that we're getting the highest quality stuff out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Other questions? Other questions or comments or thoughts? Yeah. Go ahead. Frank.
Do you know of any other disciplines that are doing this? Psychologists have a very different approach to this. The APS in particular, American Psychological Society, encourages members to go edit Wikipedia so that it was self-correcting basically, and it proved that if you ever read a psychological article on Wikipedia now, it's pretty good. What was, I guess, your impetus for doing this as opposed to something like that, or is this new, I guess?
I think there are a couple of things that we could say. When we use philosophy here, we don't mean to designate that that row of offices up in the Sparks building, right? We intend to be drawing on a much broader, much more inclusive sense of philosophy, which is connected to the reason that we earn PhDs, whether it's in philosophy or in some other, right? So the idea is that what we're looking for is a certain style of discourse, a certain kind of give and take and back and forth with subject matter. And then another important part of this is that part of the group that we identify ourselves with in terms of doing public philosophy, it's a group of people that recognize that wicked problems don't respect our disciplinary boundaries, and that if we're going to deal with challenges that are challenges for us as citizens, right? We're both trained as philosophers, right? But we're also in dialogue with other people as citizens. Those people have other things to bring to the table that we can't bring. We have certain special skills that we can bring, and so part of the idea is to develop a platform for that kind of publicly oriented discussion, and allowing it to happen in real time instead of in print journal time, so that it might have an actual effect on policy. And so, although it's the Public Philosophy Journal, it really is conceived of as not just a philosophy journal, and even not just an academic journal, insofar as many of the people who have the kind of expertise that we need to rely on are going to be people who aren't in the academy, right? And some of these people may even be philosophers who left the academy because of the way academic philosophy gets practiced, and so have been situated in places to understand things that we don't understand. That'll be helpful for moving these conversations forward.
And I guess I would add the other issue here, the thing that interests me is how do we cultivate the practices of online digital scholarship? So Wikipedia is a great example of people, this crowdsourcing of knowledge, and it's a remarkable thing. But is it really helping us learn how to respond effectively to one another in a digital world that brings knowledge forward? Can we build an environment that rewards or incentivizes, and now I got to figure that whole thing out with what I learned this morning, but that makes intrinsically valuable being rigorous but kind, being really thoughtful and helpful, but also holding people accountable? And can we figure out a way to build that kind of a community? I can hardly imagine a worse group to try to do it with than professional philosophers, so I'm worried. And yet, I mean, I think there's such a strong commitment to this idea of habits, cultivating excellent habits of scholarly communication. So that's really behind the scene here, in both projects. I mean, I think, and the question is also, how does design fit into that? That's one of the things that's being, we're going to go to Michigan State next week, and we're going to be hashing through, so, well, if we make this design decision, what does it mean for that? And that's, you know, we're not used to really thinking that way, and it's really interesting. Yeah.
This is really great. I can see why you would need a grant to do the extensive work that you're doing on
Yeah.
it. So from two hats that I'm wearing, one as an editor of a very kind of established, prestigious, traditional journal, but also from a research community that wants to kind of start their own on a shoestring and an online format. What advice would you have both to the traditional journals and the folks wanting to kind of do a startup online thing as some principles or some ideas from what you're doing that we could apply without the manpower that it's going to take to do this really more complicated?
Well, I guess one thing is we can take your information and get back to you in a little, because we're really at the early stages of this. So we've actually been contacting people at Press Forward at George Mason, and they've been doing some of this. So that Digital Humanities Now and the Journal of Digital Humanities that Kris Klotz mentioned, their model is to use Press Forward to curate content and to bring it into what they're calling Digital Humanities Now, and that's something that can be done on a shoestring. It's a WordPress blog. It's Press Forward is the name of the plugin, and you can get together with the community that you have. You can find your website, and we're doing that now. We're doing that without the. I mean, okay, we're paying Kris and Andre to be our graduate assistants, but yeah, not enough. And
But if we paid you more, it would.
yeah, right. Oh, we just right. We learned that
It's
today.
not a motivator.
No, it's intrinsic. So I think there are some things you could do with what's out there, but it's true that not only does it take some significant financial backing, but then we also have to figure out how to do sustainability and how this goes on and continues on.
And then I think the next thing to note is that part of this project is not just building the Public Philosophy Journal, but it's building the platform that is all going to be open source, is all going to be available to anybody else who wants to adopt this model.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it may be that
It may be that the philosophers
that we go down in a
fail, but
blaze of
somebody
glory,
else-
but somebody else uses the lessons that we learned
Yeah.
and the model and the platform that we've left behind to do something even better than we're able to do.
Yeah.
So how's the development process and stage of the open source, the software platform?
We have right now we have our partners at Matrix at Michigan State who are working on building the platform for us.
We think they have the easier job.
Yeah, they keep reminding us that they have the easier job. But the end of the first year of the grant is in October,
Yeah.
and the hope is that we're going to have at least a workable platform available in October. Until then, we're going to be using the WordPress blog to be building the community and doing some of the things that we're going to be doing.
Curating some of the content.
And then I think we have a 2-year plan for unrolling further aspects of the.
I mean, when we originally
functionality.
proposed this to Mellon, I said, okay, I've got a 3-year, $800,000 project we want to propose to you, and they said, okay, very interesting project, but how about we do 1 year at a time? And we said, sure, okay, philosophers aren't used to getting $236,000 for anything, so we're still with
Except student loan.
Right, in student loan debt, and it was like we got this, and then, oh yeah, that thing on the whiteboard, we got to kind of do that now. So we're in that kind of, but we've also been talking a lot about sustainability. So we have already had commitments from the dean to give us a graduate student in an ongoing way, from the Rock Ethics Institute to give us a graduate student in an ongoing way. So one of the things that we haven't talked much about is the attempt to use this as an opportunity to help graduate students in philosophy, both here and at Michigan State, learn digital scholarship and learn the skills of excellent digital communications as a way to hopefully help them get good jobs when they leave, either in a tenure line, whatever, research one job, or maybe running a journal of your own somewhere, or in a library, or doing something else. So part of my strategy as Associate Dean for Graduate Education in Liberal Arts is how can I expand the humanities job market by giving our humanities PhDs skills that go beyond, that are rooted in, but go beyond, you know, the real ability to write effectively, read in creative ways, and all of that. Those skills, you know, other people are going to need besides just professors in institutions. So, you had a question, I thought.
Yeah, as someone from the library and web authoring, I was just thinking about how will this work for citing, and how will this work for archiving and that kind of.
Well, we can talk about the journal. One thing that I've confirmed with Cambridge is that when people tweet out and send out content from my book, that will come with the metadata about the original book and with the citation information. I've actually asked them to put onto the website links to Zotero and other kinds of things so that people will be able to cite the document. I tried to get them to do away with pages in the physical copy of the book. I wanted them to note paragraphs instead. They didn't go for that so much because a paragraph online it would be easier to find. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how the codex experience versus the digital experience works out. I'm hoping that I can convince them to make it open access enough so that if you have the DOI, the digital object identifier, and know the URL, you can get on and actually start commenting on the book. Now with the journal, Matrix has, I don't know, gold level, platinum level archiving. I mean, we had a big fight with them. You'll appreciate this it wasn't a big fight, but it was pretty much of a fight. We said everything's got to be archived. All the comments, everything. And Dean, you know, who's the director there, is like, no, you don't want that. And then Ethan over there, another one, he said, no, that's what they want. We want to do that. Everything's got to have this deep level archive. Well, it's going to be good. On the other hand, well, what if somebody wants to change their comment or edit their thing? I think we should let them do it to some degree. But part of the point of the journal is to publish the process as well as the product. And the product itself is kind of a moment in time that we capture and say, yeah, this is a published thing, but the conversation continues.
And we do have the idea of a kind of one journal, two interfaces. So you'll see the messy side where all the work is being done, the commenting is going on, but then the work that's done in that ecosystem will be productive of articles that will then appear online in what's becoming a more recognizable online journal format, right? So it'll be, people will be able to reference a canonical version of it, but then people will also be able to go back to the other site and ask interesting questions about the processes through which it was developed.
The messy conversation we're calling Oscar, and
Those are code names.
Code name Oscar. Felix is the journal site. Nobody wants to odd couple. Okay, sorry. It's a code? Sorry. No, I thought that was funny. Yeah, go ahead.
So, are you publishing articles that are published elsewhere? And if so, how does that influence translation into other disciplines where you're only allowed to publish content?
So right now we're taking content from around the web and just pointing to it. Well, we're taking the first paragraph and then we're pointing to the actual website. So that's part of this curation process. But we will not be publishing, we will not be just simply republishing things that have been published elsewhere. When the journal's up and running, this is going to be all original content published for the journal, always open, never closed. So now we've actually had some conversations with JSTOR because they're very interested in what we're doing, because what they want to do is allow their users to have access to journal articles in their database and have those journal articles be brought to bear on the conversation. So if we could get this to work right, and we're firing on all cylinders with publishing in JSTOR, and we get into JSTOR's ecosystem, and you're a member of JSTOR, now all of a sudden maybe you're able to not only cite an article that you found in JSTOR, but now you're pulling that into connection with our article, and now we're having a really interesting scholarly communication. Now, I don't know how much they're going to let that be open And if we entered into a relationship with them, we would insist that they would never put any wall in front of ours. I mean, part of this journal is to perform public philosophy as a way of publishing about public philosophy. So we're not going to let any of it go back behind a paywall. But still, if we could enter into that kind of relationship with JSTOR, that would be, and just say, you know, that they could publish our journal, or ours could be one of their journals, not exclusively, but one of them. I think we would get a lot of discoverability that way too, because a lot of people go to JSTOR to look for things.
Because I think you'll discover a lot of those gaps in knowledge, but you have to read the previous literature.
Right.
That's where those conversations come from. But I just didn't know the logistics of dealing with articles that are already published and how they generate that knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not going to publish that, but we are going to do that trick that we all do, I think, in our scholarship, which is comb footnotes and articles that we would like to publish, and find those authors and then ask them, hey, do you have a blog post or two about this or about something related to this that we could pull in, and then maybe ask you to write more academically. And so we're going to do a little bit more reaching out than letting things just come to us. Yeah, you want to say
So,
something?
yeah, maybe even dovetailing with what you just suggested there, what about the idea of taxonomy of comments, both within an article that's been published and also across articles, so that you could categorize, maybe that's something you've already been thinking about, so that I can find other like-minded comments and commenters and so forth.
That's a good idea. I mean, we should think about that as we talk about how the interface is going to look. We want, when you're looking at an article, we want that kind of related tags associated with this, and maybe comments you might be also interested in, sort of like what happens on Amazon.com, right? You get like, you know, you might also be interested in this. And so that's a way also for more discoverability.
We have discussed tagging or taxonomy, having a taxonomy for comments, but only at a level of, well, this is more of a copy editing kind of comment, or this is a content-based kind of comment. But
I'm even thinking it's different categories of taxonomies, so
Right.
author
Yeah.
taxonomies, topic taxonomies, that sort of thing. And
Right.
you could filter based on all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's been a part of the discussion, that it won't be that the only object that's relevant within this ecosystem is the article, right? But there will be the author, there will be comments, and so there will be various different ways of establishing connections between different objects within.
I think we have time maybe for one more question, if there's one. Yeah.
Have you gotten any pushback from what I'll call a traditional or conventional academic community claiming that this wouldn't be
Yeah.
serious enough?
Yeah.
You can see my putting
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, good. Right.
I'm saying that's
Yeah,
fine.
this is not you. We're not getting one right now. Okay, just so you're clear.
It does have to be mentioned.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, actually, we're just not big enough yet to get, you know, I think. I think if this thing starts succeeding, we'll start getting it. And the real thing that I'm worried about is, you know, there is a world out there, a digital world of philosophers, and it is not pretty in terms of collegiality and you know, it's just, we have a lot of work to do to model the kinds of scholarship that we want. Now, on the other hand, I gave a presentation like this at the American Philosophical Association in January, or I guess it ended December, and I was ready for, you know, a little bit of hate, but there was really interest. I mean, the one question that was really a good question that has struck with me, and something we have to think about is, well, part of traditional journal, let's not forget that publishing a journal involves the deployment of power. And, you know, this came from somebody who was publishing a journal and said, look, I could sink an article by just sending it to the wrong reviewer, right? So how does that play into, how does decision-making play in this kind of a context? Yes, it's going to be public. There will be other reviewers. But we're also planning on doing some of that more traditional, inviting scholars in the sphere, in the area, to really make comments on the article. And, you know, how we choose that is going to be interesting. We're going to have these coordinators of collaborative peer review coordinators who are responsible for managing that system. So we might even have the capacity for anonymous review in certain cases. Let's say if it's a junior faculty member who really doesn't want their name associated with this. So we would maybe be able to toggle anonymity on and off in certain kinds of cases. But it's going to be interesting.
We generally do have questions about the relation between this kind of publication and promotion and tenure, right? And one of the ways that we have thought about addressing that is to recognize that that's a legitimate concern for a whole lot of people. But that one aspect, one of the things that we're trying to do that, tenure review committees can look at it and say, okay, I see how I can fit this into our traditional rubrics. And so, since the idea is that the academy, like all things, is changing, there may be some people who, for whatever reason, decide not to be that active in this kind of way because of the particular place they're situated. But there may be a lot of people on either side of that tenure divide who aren't worried about that kind of thing and who are more interested in just contributing to this kind of work being done. So,
Do you want to say last
Yeah, just one quick thing. I mean, one thing that I think we're trying to do is recognize the kind of work that goes into reviewing, right? Because no one ever gets recognized for reviewing an article, right? And one of the problems of open review is that it's much more onerous than blind review. You can do a blind review in 10 minutes, no one will know, right? You can't do that with an open review. So people tend to write. There's been research on this that open reviews are of typically higher quality, but they're much more onerous, so people are hesitant. But if we keep a record of that, and we then can get some kind of easily digestible analytics for tenure committees and things like that, I mean, we're not going to change the discipline, right? But we might help get the ball rolling a bit.
So, all right, well, thank you all for coming to talk to us. Thanks.